This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Have you ever wondered, what would be the right time to do something? Better yet, what about where to actually do it at? I think oftentimes we kind of go through life, I would say, willy-nilly like we don't know exactly what to do. We're forging our way through it, and we're doing the best we can. I know I've talked about on recent shows about some of the endeavors that I've been working on. And quite honestly, how I don't really have that much knowledge of it. I don't really have a mentorship in that situation. And I'm really just reading as much as I can and putting myself out there. And I know for many of my listeners, you're doing the same thing. You're really just forging new grounds. Not necessarily sure if it's the right way to do it, but you just got to do it. And I find that any type of information that we can get that can make our journey easier, that can make the voyage just kind of a straight shot, I don't know. I think that's something that we want to kind of look at. It's compelling, and it actually might give us more of a quality of life than we have. On the show, when I bring on a guest, I'm bringing somebody on that knows something about something that I'm interested in, that I care about, and that they know it very well. I'm always going to bring in the right expert to discuss stuff because I'm so interested in it, and I want to hear from someone that knows something inside and out. Recently, I stumbled across some interesting knowledge. I stumbled across some things that I didn't even know really existed. Now, I understand about astrology, don't get me wrong. I know that I was born at a certain time and that I was born in a certain state and all that stuff. I know what my sign is. I know that kind of stuff. But I did not realize that our information from our birth could really catapult into more logical information that we as adults right now could use. Did you know that actually looking at your chart could facilitate information like knowing places to live, perhaps, or about the timing in one's life, when you should do something, maybe when you shouldn't do something, as well as certain strategies that can really take your life to the next level. Well, I'm learning about all this. And today, on today's show, I want to bring in a friend of mine and also someone who is highly knowledgeable about these subjects right here. VerDarLuz is known as the Practical Esoteric, and he's the founder of the Divine Timing Coaching, a collection of services that acts as the compass for your actual company. Divine Timing assists entrepreneurs, coaches, small businesses who want precise guidance on how to not only steer the ship of their business, but will also evolving with their personal and professional relationships. And VerDarLuz and I actually met in Austin at a conference recently. It was the Icons of Influence conference, and we instantaneously got along. VerDarLuz, it's great for you to be on the show. Thanks for joining me here on Live Your True Life Perspectives.
Ashley, it's really an honor to be here. I'm super excited about today's show.
I'm really looking forward to it because, it's such a big deal when you find out about new information. I'm like a kid in a candy store, when I find out that this stuff exists, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Where have you been all my life? You know what I'm saying? I just think it's awesome. And you and I just started talking, and I think what you have to say is awesome. So just kind of do an introduction for the listeners so that they kind of understand where you're coming from, because I think you have some really deep information about the subject, and then we'll start a deep dive in.
Well, great. Wow, there's so many places we could start from, but I'll just share a little bit about, how I help people, and a little bit about why I got passionate about this subject. Very similar to you, where I'm, very curious about everything, and that's taken me all over the world to about 40 different countries. And when I was in Asia, back in like 2003 and 4, I really started to get turned on to astrology. I'd been like a skeptic, like most people, but I was open, just didn't have direct experience with it. So then I dated a woman there who introduced me to Western astrology, and she turned me on to this concept of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine, and how astrology has these symbols for that, being Mars and Venus. So these would be like costumes that our masculine energy and our feminine energy wear in our life. And when she described my masculine feminine archetypes or patterns, I got like really blown away. And I saw that this was really accurate for what I'd been attracted to a lot in my life, and also what I wanted to be honored for or kind of acknowledged for in my masculine energy. So it definitely turned me on a bit, up something inside of me. I also got a Vedic and in Tibetan astrology reading. So I saw how different systems were reflecting, different aspects of my soul, different patterns inside of me. And once I came back to the States, I got really enthralled with the Mayan calendar. And, you probably remember everyone thinking about the 2012 end date of December 21st, 2012, and the Mayans' predictions for a great world shift. So I got really obsessed with that. And I just studied the Mayans really deeply, Mayan astronomy and astrology. And because of that, I met very synchronistically some Mayan and Western astrologers who became mentors. And then from there, I just was like, wow, this astrology language, because that's what it is. It's a language of the stars. That's what it means, astrologos. It really is describing, it's like laser pointed psychology, and I'd always been interested in psychology. And once I came to astrology, I was like, wow, and in a 60-minute or 90-minute consultation, we could go so deep into core patterns in us and how to evolve those patterns, how to become more conscious with our relationships, or find the kinds of careers that would be supportive, or know when to do what in our life. And that's a lot of work I do now with entrepreneurs and also with families, supporting families, understanding each other better. So for relationship work, for understanding the best places to live and when to do what, this profound ancient tool is such a gift to us.
I think it's amazing because I find that oftentimes a lot of us feel lost. And coming from my perspective of, being a therapist and, helping people, I think any sort of information that can help somebody see their life more clear and understand that they have more power in their life, I think is profound. And so that's why I really wanted to have you on, because I just think this is really cool stuff that I get really interested in. And I think most people do, because, as I say, the most important relationship that you have in your entire life is with yourself. There's a reason for that. There's a reason we come in on our own. There's a reason we leave on our own,
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
And oftentimes people don't really explore that. And so let's begin to dive in, because this is very interesting stuff. Let's begin with auspicious timing and kind of talk about that, define what that is first, and then, what that means.
Sure. Yeah, great. Well, I mean, the oldest kind of astrology on the planet is known as electional astrology, and it really doesn't have anything to do with politics. It's a lot about electing the right time, or the time when what's happening in the cosmos or in the heavens above in the sky, when we see the planets in a configuration that will match what we're trying to intend on the earth. So they would use this, the ancients would use this to, for instance, know when to plant the crops, or know when to go to war, or know when to coronate a king. And so this would be one of the roles of the ancient astrologers and seers, diviners. So we use the same kind of concept today. And I have a new podcast about this that came out recently about the most optimal timing. So we can use this, for instance, when we are going to get married or make a commitment ceremony. We definitely want to have certain energies in the sky that will look like what we intend for our relationship. Some people might want to have a family. Some people might want to travel around the world a lot. Some people might want to build a business together. And we can elect, a wedding chart that will support the intentions of that couple. So that's really fascinating. And one of the most common uses of electional astrology. Also, we can elect the best times to go into surgery. This is a very important, very dangerous activity. And there are definitely things we would rather see, and other things we prefer not to see in the sky. And then we can go into business, for instance. We say, hey, when should I launch this new website, or incorporate my business, or hire people, or even fire people. There are better times to support different endeavors, real estate investment, real estate selling, and one general cycle that a lot of people know about, but it's still kind of getting into the mainstream, is called Mercury retrograde. And this is something I think, Ashley, probably you, if you've tuned into it, or if you do, you probably see, because you have some Gemini in your chart, that people who have a lot of Gemini or Virgo, like myself and you, we're often affected by Mercury retrogrades a lot, because Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. Every planet rules one or two signs of the zodiac. And what that Mercury retrograde, what we experience during that is we have some challenges or tensions around the areas that Mercury rules. Mercury rules technology, communications, travels, idea sharing, interpersonal communication. So signing contracts. Mercury was the god of trade. So what happens during a retrograde cycle, which is a 3-week cycle that happens 3 times a year, is that all of the areas that the planet Mercury, the god Mercury rules, they all kind of go haywire. They go a bit crazy. The retrograde is more of an internal time, a more reflective time. So when we try to do things externally related to that planet, in this case, technology, travel, negotiations, we don't have enough information sometimes. We're missing some vital piece of information, or we have delays. The negotiation goes wrong. There's more hassle and stress involved. So that's typically one of the cycles that we would always look at, not trying to begin a major venture, not sign a contract, not go to surgery, not try to, buy real estate, things like that we would never want to do during a Mercury retrograde. So that's like a very general cycle. But when we're talking about auspicious timing, we want to go very deeply into one's personal chart. And we can also do that with a corporation's chart, because every business was incorporated at a certain time, and that goes through certain cycles. But we want to look at cycles where if we're trying to grow in a certain way, we might look at where the planet Jupiter is in our life, and we're going to see where we're expanding, where we're feeling inspired for a year of time in our life. And then we can take advantage of opportunities there. If we look at where our chart, we're also looking at timing. And this kind of timing is more like you got to get down to work with wherever Saturn is. You got to put in effort. You got to really discipline yourself. And Saturn's going to really bring things up to your consciousness to manifest on the earth plane in a very real world way. It's going to require hard work. So every planet is like a teacher, teaching us a certain lesson. And so when we look at timing, we're looking at what lessons are happening now, how best can I take advantage of them, and where will some opportunities be, where will some challenges be, and then my work as a translator of that is to inspire you to take the most evolutionary path with these cycles, with these timings.
I find all this stuff very interesting, and I know that there's a lot of folks out there like, oh, come on, really, what is this retrograde? What about this timing, or how do we figure it out? So let's dive deep into this, because I think it's profound. So how do you take someone's chart? Let's say like you get someone's chart. What is the information that has to be provided to begin even to read or to interpret the chart?
Yeah, so to interpret the chart, every astrologer will always ask for your birth date, your birth time, and your birth place. And, this is that interface, that moment when our soul entered the earth plane. It's a very significant time, in all of our history, the first moment. So, some people don't have their birth time, and so that can be like, well, I guess I can't ever look at this. But that's not true. If you don't have your birth time, we can actually study your chart, and we can even study some cycles, but we don't know what areas of life, which in astrology are called houses, we don't know what areas of life are ruled by what patterns of energy, which are the signs. So there are some things we can't know, but we can still know a lot. So that's helpful. Just some people think, we can't look at my chart because I don't have a birth time, but actually we can do a lot of deep interpretation without the birth time. Of course, if we have the birth time, then we can give you the most accurate reading possible. And also, we can do locational astrology, which we'll be talking about, is that's really dependent on birth time. So we need the birth date, time, and place, and then, we can go in and study, all of the major cycles you're going through and how they're going to affect the various realms of life, business, career, finances, personal relationships, family, your home environment. So then that's going to tell us, when we should, for instance, every month, we might have a better day or two where we want to launch, maybe launch a product or get out there and promote something that we're working on. And there might be another day that it's really time to take off, like take a break, take 2 days off, or work on the house. So when I work with clients that are...
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
The deep way, my coaching practice, we're always looking, we're drilling down, like, okay, this month, let's look at the best days optimum times for these kinds of activities. So we can go really, really detailed into planning out weeks and months, but we can also look on the macro level and look at the larger cycles of growth, how your soul is evolving over time, different paths of evolution that are unfolding for you, which may be 1 or 2 or 3 year long cycles. So every planet has a different rhythm of cycle to it. Some cycles, like the planets like Venus, are very quick, the moon being the quickest, whereas planet Pluto, it's a dwarf planet, but still very effective in our lives, very intense cycle. Pluto will take 3 years in our life over one of our planets, so we'll feel it for many, many years, and it's like a long journey of intense transformation in our lives. So every planet has a different cycle that we work with, and that's really what we're describing when we're looking at your chart in detail. And when I'm able to coach with someone over time, then we can really dive into how best to work with these cycles.
That's interesting. My chart must be in Pluto for the last 20 years.
Well, some people do have a really strong, what we call natal Pluto. Natal just refers to the birth. People born with a strong Pluto aspect, like Sun conjunct Pluto, whether in the same sign of the zodiac or maybe in opposition to Pluto from the moon or something like that. Wow, you're definitely working with part of the underworld, the cycles of death and rebirth regularly in life. And that's what some people have come to do, and it's not a bad or a good thing. We never use that kind of language in astrology, just as a therapist, and I always feel that a lot of times I'm more of a therapist. I'm also a coach, and I just have a tool that's very, very laser pointed into the soul. And that's why I feel really blessed using astrology and numerology and another system called human design. They're all just different language systems, symbolic tools to help us understand, who we are, the patterns that we have inside of us, and the best ways of playing those out in our daily lives.
That's awesome. Okay, so we got it. So I gave you. It's funny. It's interesting because I for all of y'all listening out there, I'm very into facts, and I'm very into knowledge, and just by talking, just you and I talking, it's very interesting. It's been a little eye-opening for me, because I think that there is a little bit of a stigma to some degree, and I feel like when I was a kid, it was interesting. When I look back as a child, I studied astrology when I was a kid, a little bit, not a lot, but I remember I was really into it when I was probably I would say 6 years old, and my dad was like, no, it's crazy talk. And it's interesting, the things that we got drawn to at a young age, and then the things that we were kind of led away from, and so it's interesting how this came about at this time in my life, and so I'm really interested, and one of the neat things about you is that you can actually figure out not only when people can or should be getting into business or doing that type of thing, or buying a house and all that great stuff, but you can actually figure out where people will actually thrive location-wise. How does that work?
Yeah, beautiful. Can I say something about just our concepts of astrology and how we kind of got indoctrinated a certain way about that?
Yeah, I would love for you to comment on that.
Well, it's just it's always something fascinating because I've studied the history of astrology a lot, and if you want a really interesting historical study, the history of astrology is fascinating because it's really the history of the world. Astrology is the oldest science on the planet. From Babylon, Sumer, Egypt, India, the Mayans, all over the world. Every culture practiced astrology. There was always court astrologers that would guide the royalty. They were always interpreting the omens, reading the signs above and just looking at what was happening below. And that's this idea called the Hermetic maxim. It's based on the mystical tradition of Hermes Trismegistus and this whole, alchemical history that we have on our planet, where it's this principle that as above, so below. That whatever happening above in the sky and the stars, in those patterns, we can look at what's happening below and can we see correspondences there. And so the astrologers and the sages and the seers and the diviners, they were just studying that relationship. And you got to think that only until the 20th century, we had something like television or radio, like before that, we spent our time under the stars. That's how we got constellations. We were telling stories based off of the stars, and those stories were reflecting what we were doing here on the earth. So there was the as below, as above, so below. And even in the Renaissance, astrology was one of the main studied subjects. I mean, right up there with everything, mathematics and literature. There was a huge movement around translating astrological texts, ancient Greek texts, and the Islamic Empire that came before the Renaissance. Actually, if there was no Islamic Empire, there would not have been the Renaissance. That whole 700 years that was stretched from Spain and Portugal all the way to China, ruled by this Islamic Empire, they had a translation movement where they would take all the sacred texts of the world and they would translate them. And astrology was massively important to this. In fact, most of the stars, like Aldebaran or Alnitak or Alnilam, there's hundreds and hundreds of stars, and they all have Arabic names. The Arabs named a lot of the stars. And so we have this really deep history. But once Christianity kind of came in and the Crusades came in, they made everything very dualistic. It was either God and Christ or the devil. And so astrology got thrown into the devil. But ironically, in the Renaissance, there was practices of Christian astrology. There are very famous Christian astrologers, William Lilly being one of them. And so you have this disconnect, even to the modern day, that we don't know how deeply astrology has been woven into our language. Like the days of the week are the planets, right? Moon Day, Tuesday is Tyr. Tyr is the Norse god of war, related to Mars. Sunday, Saturn's Day. I mean, it's in everyday language that we use, but we've kind of been removed from it, which is really sad because, like in India, they never lost astrology. It's always been sacred. They get birth charts read, regularly for the young children when they're born. They go see an astrologer when they're going to arrange a marriage to make sure that it will be a happy marriage. I mean, it's a rich, deep tradition, very respected tradition in India. And, there's been a loss in the European and kind of Western world for hundreds of years. But now
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Resurgence. And, what I like to bring is a real practical use of this. So when we talk about business, when we talk about relocation, we talk about families and helping to raise the next generation. These are really practical ways we can use this ancient tool for collective empowerment. So that's my little rant there on the history of astrology. But if people want to know more, Benson Bobrick has a beautiful book called The Fated Sky. And there's a number of great astrological history books that will just blow you away. Just absolutely blow you away.
Yeah, I think it's pretty powerful stuff. I'm just now getting into it, so I'm looking forward to learning as much as I can and taking it into consideration. I think life is, nowadays with all the stressors in our life and all the responsibilities, and I think a lot of people out there listening right now, a lot of my listeners are just like overwhelmed with work and stress and, whether you have kids or family, and all that on top of that, as well as health and wellness. And I mean, it's tough. And I think any sort of answers we can get can be very powerful.
Yeah, and one of the great things about the study of astrology is that it's all-encompassing. Because when you look at a birth chart, and it kind of looks like, you just see this for the first time, and you're like, what is that? It's just a bunch of symbols. But it's a picture of the sky, and each one of those divisions of the sky, or those houses, represents a different area of our life. So you mentioned health and wellness. That's related to what we call the sixth house in astrology. So there's going to be a pattern of energy that will always govern how you work with your health, depending on what sign's there. There's also going to be maybe a planet or two planets that are occupying that house that will inform us more about health over the course of your life. Like if you have Mars there, you might really need to do like physical aerobic activity every day. And if you don't, you could have things like inflammation. You could be very easily irritated. You could be more aggressive, the darker sides of Mars. So it's telling us how best to work with your health. And we can do that with every area of life, relationships, career, creativity. It's very specific about how, what patterns will be in different areas of life. And then that gives you more consciousness to be more willful and more intentional in those various areas of life. It's just really rich self-discovery process.
That's really awesome. And I think that when people get to know more about themselves, you take yourself more personally. One of the things that we really need to focus on in this lifetime, and I've done many videos on this on YouTube, and I've discussed this throughout the radio show for the countless years I've been on the radio, is really talking about self-love and self-care. And a lot of people that come into my office, 99.9% of the people that come into my office, and many of you that are listening right now, do not love yourself. And it's something that it wasn't a class that we took. It wasn't something that many of our parents, put into our head, because it's not something that our parents did for themselves. And I feel that the more that we go internal to learn about ourselves, the more powerful it is. But not only that, the more that we learn really helps define ourselves, and also goes a long way internally to increase not only our personal self-value, but our self-worth. And I think that can go a long way to alleviating a lot of negative situations in our life.
Yeah, it's super deep, actually, what you're saying. And it is reflective in my work with my own clients, where we're using astrology as it is like a tool to help us really love ourselves and respect that we do have these patterns. But once we know about them, we can be really conscious with how we want to exercise them, play them out in our lives, and really support ourselves and the whole world with our gifts, with our talents and our skills. One of the great ways that we can do this, and it blew me away when I first started, it's been about 13 years now, is relocation astrology. It's also called AstroLocality, or locational astrology, or astrocartography, some people know it as. And for me, this was something that, as soon as I learned about it, I was like, I have to know more about this. And also, it became the area that I decided to niche into. And it's a simple premise that most of us probably feel or intuit in our lives. Different places have different energies for us. Like we have a different connection, in somewhere we feel really harmonic, or like we really resonate with a certain location. Maybe if we've, lived a few different places in our life, one place was, had a very specific vibe to it. Or we've traveled somewhere and we just feel like we've really clicked in, or we had some really difficult experiences somewhere. So this is really the essence of astrolocality, is we can map out the world, and where around the world we have different kinds of energetic influences for us. So when I work with clients with this, we basically work on two different levels. Let's say you're really curious to travel to India, and you want to know what kinds of energies are in India for you all over the country, and how best to work with those energies. Great. Then we can study how your chart looks in that part of the world, and we can give you all of the dominant energies that are there, or the dominant planets, teachers, like we were talking about, like the characters inside of you that are going to be really strong and influencing or inspiring certain kinds of experiences there for you. It's like certain patterns will be more or less dominant for you in different places in the world. So we can map that out, and we can also map out the time that you're there. So you're like, should I go this year, maybe next year? We can actually look, maybe there's a certain opportunity that you want to pick up on 2 years from now. So that would be one way that we would look at astrolocality. You know where you want to go. You want to know the best times to be there, and how best to navigate what kinds of opportunities, what kinds of challenges might be there. Secondly, we use this, and this is how I work with clients a lot, is, there's like 3 or 4 regions I'm kind of drawn to. I'm not so happy where I'm living, or I'm kind of, that phase of my life is done, and I'm really calling in, this kind of relationship, or this kind of career, or this kind of community that I want to be a part of, whatever our intentions are. And then my clients will give me 3 or 4 regions they're drawn to, and we'll paint a picture of the possibilities there. And sometimes I'll pull up locations that maybe they didn't even mention. If I have time to do like a full global study, a deep dive around the world, then we can really look at power places everywhere around the world and what kinds of opportunities are there for you. So we can look at, I know I'm drawn to these places, what kinds of energies are there, or I know what intentions I have in my life, and I'd like to know what places will support those intentions. Because a lot of the times we're living in places that completely have the opposing energies to what we're trying to call into our life. Maybe I could give you an example from my own life about that theme.
I'd like that.
So I was born on the West Coast of the States. I was born in California, San Jose, California, and I grew up there. And everything was pretty peaceful growing up. I was supported, had a pretty stable family. But as soon as I went to college and my adult years, things really started to change. So when I went to school the first couple of years, I was unhappy, kind of a little depressed. I decided to start to travel internationally, and that was a big decision in my life. But what happened when I came back to California, went back to school in Santa Cruz, California, and I ended up having to move every 3 months, like for a year and a half, consistently. There was either a problem in the home, there was only a short-term agreement. There was just all these issues each time. And then I moved up to Portland, Oregon, and in Oregon as well, I had to move frequently. The longest I stayed somewhere was for a year. And even in that first year, I was with a partner, but then she started dating someone else in our circle. And so the home environment, we were living together, was not so pleasant all of the time at that phase of my life. And so basically everywhere on the West Coast, same thing up in Seattle. I lived there for 6 months and moved multiple times. It wasn't grounded, and that was before I went to Asia. So everywhere on the West Coast was consistently producing this effect where, like, I couldn't feel stable, or there was a problem in the home, or there was some kind of conflict, and it was exhausting. And as soon as I moved to Colorado, and I stayed there for about 10 years, I lived in the first place for a year, the next place for a year and a half, and then I stayed in a home in the mountains for 4 years, the longest I've ever stayed anywhere. And then another year somewhere, another year somewhere. And that was a huge difference for me. It was like salvation after moving so much. And the main reason why is because on the West Coast for me, I have the planet Mars right on what we call the angle of the home. That the part of the chart that rules your home environment, what's going on in the vicinity of where you live or your home space. And Mars, as a symbol, represents a number of things. One of them being restlessness, the other being aggression or conflict, sometimes defensiveness. Mars was the god of war. So Mars is here right on this very sensitive angle of the home. You really don't want to live where Mars is on the angle of the home, because you're either going to have a problem or a battle in your home, or you're going to move around a lot. You're not going to feel stable. And that's really my dynamic on the West Coast. Every time I go back home to my parents, or if I go to Southern California, anywhere where that Mars is strong, I'm always more on fire. I'm always a little bit more reactive. And in my personal chart, Mars is a challenging planet in some ways. It's not the most well-placed planet. That's a very important thing in this work is it's not just the planetary line that's strongest. It's actually, what is that planet doing in your birth chart? And this is why you really need to look deeply and work with someone in this tool of locational astrology who knows a lot about a condition of a planet, and if that energy line will be supportive to what someone's intending. And for me, my Mars is, it's a little bit iffy. And so, for instance, Mars rules my area of health and wellness, but also illness. So I'm telling you the truth, every time I go to Southern California, and I've been there for like a week, I get sick. And Mars is exactly on my angle of the home there, and Mars rules my area of illness. So now I can know that, right? And I can either do a lot of preventative work, like not ever going there, or I can know that going in, I'm going to have to be really careful with my health if I go there. And I don't really have the desire to live in that part of the world anymore, because I know that that's going to be a consistent energy for me there, and it's not going to be grounding. It's not going to be supportive to what I want in my life right now. So that's a personal example of how that works, and how sometimes we're living in places that don't really support what we want in our life. We just bring more stress than we might want.
That's really interesting. That's really cool. Yeah, so let's talk about locational stuff, because I think that's powerful, because a lot of people don't even understand or haven't even thought about that. I think people are like, wow, I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a bad week, or I'm having a bad month, or I'm having a bad year. Some things just don't seem to get right. And I think what happens too is, I don't think that it counts for everything as far as if you're having, a bad time like this over and over again. But I do feel like if you really are going through stuff like this, and like bad things, and you're doing the right thing and bad things just keep happening, I mean, you got to sit back and ask yourself, why is this happening? Am I bringing this to myself? Is there something that I need to be aware of? Or better yet, can I step back, and is there other things that might be a factor that's happening as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just ironic, because even places that we might consider like a paradise, like a Bali or Costa Rica or somewhere like that, if in your personal chart there's maybe a challenging planet for you over that part of the world, then it might not be the paradise you're really seeking. I had a friend of mine who was going to Bali, and what I saw over Bali for him, he was going with a new partner. He was going for about 6 weeks. I saw two crossings, two different influences, because in this work, there's multiple ways the planets can influence a location. So there's a lot of factors. It's not just a single factor. And so it does take quite a bit of time to really interpret a location accurately. But I saw these two Pluto crossings, and Pluto represents, intense processes of transformation, catharsis, death, rebirth cycles. He was the Lord of the unconscious. I mean, Pluto rules therapy. It's a deep questioning of our souls, and things like shamanic work. But on the shadow side, Pluto is can be pretty dark. Criminal activity, violence, power struggles, jealousy, control issues. So he's going to two Pluto lines on a vacation. And so I'm telling him, when you go there, first, don't be paranoid, but be be careful with your things, because Pluto can bring in criminal types of energy, people that have a hidden agenda, right? So just be like, just be careful, have your sixth sense up, and be more aware, and watch for any manipulation or anything like that. Okay. And then don't fight anything that might happen. If there's a tough thing that happens, try not to fight it, because what happens on Pluto lines is that the ego comes into its like confrontation with it really deeply. And so all of our resistances come up, and we create a lot more drama than is even already happening. So I told him something, just flow with it, learn to surrender. What's the lesson? Transform some old skin that you have. So, and then he was going with a new partner. So he said, hey, one of the best ways of working with Pluto is like to do some really deep healing. And in terms of relationships, do something like sacred sexuality, like Tantra, and practices of deep connection with your partner. It's a very intimate energy. Pluto's very deep in the soul. So I said that would be one of the great things to do while you're there. So he came back 6 weeks later, and he told me that he was, he was mugged,
wow.
While he was on this, on his motorbike within the first week that he was there.
Oh.
And he had $3,000 in his wallet.
Oh.
And so he lost $3,000. And so he, of course, he heard my voice in the reading, and I mean, he went with it. Obviously, it hurt a lot. He had to call his brother, get money wired. It was a whole scene, right? It was really dramatic. But he didn't fight the experience. He wasn't hurt, but he lost all the money. And then he actually had a really good time with his partner, and they did all of this kind of deep healing work and really strong sexual connection work. But I always use that example as, like a very strong, concentrated experience of Pluto, and that typically most of us don't want to spend a lot of time on a Pluto line, or need to know if we're going there. These kinds of things can happen, and then we might make a choice. Maybe I don't want to go right on top of that line, because if you get some breathing space from it, if you're not right on a Pluto crossing or any of these planetary crossings, you don't have to feel the effect as strongly, and so we might want to give you a little bit of space from such an intense energy. And he was on exactly crossing them. I had another client, and the same thing happened, but in Costa Rica. He had a Pluto line crossing there. He had a bunch of money stolen at a retreat center, like out of his cabana.
Wow.
And so it's real. This stuff happens, and so what I try to do is I never try to paint like a fatalistic picture, because that's not a really healthy or ethical use of astrology. But we do see a pattern, and then we see what's the best way of working with that, and where some challenges might be with that. Even a planet that we might consider to be very beneficial for us, like typically people like what Venus represents. She represents love, beauty, harmony, an appreciation of culture and nature and, aesthetics and just kind of sensual joy. And Jupiter represents abundance and fortune and, expansion and opportunity. Those planets also have shadows to them, So even if someone's going to one of those planetary lines, I will express, hey, you got to also watch for this. Like a Jupiter line, you might say yes to too much. And so then you overextend yourself, and then you can get exhausted. You can't follow through on commitments.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're always painting a story or like a narrative of all of the possibilities in a location. And then that gives you more consciousness or more intention as you approach, moving there or relocating or just traveling there for a period of time.
Very cool.
I thought maybe we could look at your maps in LA. That was a place that you were interested in checking out, because I know that's a power spot for you in some ways, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
Okay, I'm open for it. And for everybody that's listening into the show, you know that I have the show on Amazon Prime, and we shoot it in Los Angeles because we have small budget. Means not put up celebrities in other place in Dallas. Just kidding. Because of our budgetary things, we have to shoot it in Los Angeles. And I've been spending a lot of time out in Los Angeles, and I do like it. I've spent a lot of time in the past, but it's always an interesting give and take. And I talked about this with you on the phone the other day. Sometimes every time I go there, I always get a lot accomplished. Always a good feeling, but I'm always limiting my amount of time. It's kind of... and I have a lot of work here, and I'm working about 80-hour weeks. So there's a combination of the fact that I got to get back to work, but there's also a combination where I want to throw so much into, a 48-hour period of time that I could do a TV show on like the last 48 hours. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like you have so much going on. So I would love to know what you find out about my chart as far as Los Angeles, California. I'm interested.
Well, it's fascinating. This is one of the reasons I always love discovering, why certain places touch people. And one of the strongest energies, it's right through the whole of Southern California, but a little bit above LA, like more like, say, Santa Barbara, but definitely in Los Angeles, is the planet Venus, most strong for you there. Venus is on one of the 4 angles in astrology, which are the most important parts of your birth chart. And she is on the angle of partnership, which we call the descendant. So Venus is on the angle of partnership. So what does that mean? It means we'll attract experiences and people who have a Venus quality to them. So what does that translate as? Well, we can have fantastic relationships with people in general. Venus was the goddess of affection, intimacy, love, relationship. So all personal relationships really benefit when Venus is on the angle of partnership. It's also a really ideal place to travel with like a romantic partner. We generally love all of the pleasurable kinds of experiences that we can share with a friend or a lover in that location. Usually there's a sense of like peace, harmony, flow, just, kind of joy through the relationships. There could also be good fortune for us in that location. Venus is typically a symbol of some abundance in our life. And the fortune would possibly come more from women that we're connected with there because Venus is the goddess, the feminine. So really beneficial female relationships. And that can translate to friendships, but also to business partnerships. And yet there is a shadow with this, or a challenge with this planet here. And it would be that we might attract one, a negative expression of Venus, which is like vanity, that people who might be too focused on their physical appearance or on like the superficial, some of that might come into our life there. And we might also see some relationships with kind of rose tinted glasses. Like we want to see the best of people, but sometimes we might not see everything, And yet ultimately this energy is saying, hey, this is a place to be in your heart with people there. And it might also say that some of the themes that might be strong for you there, like topics even, could be like a lot around relationships, how to be in healthy relationships. That would be really, really strong in this location for you. And then the way that we go deeper, in interpreting a planet in a location is to say, well, your Venus is in Cancer, so you might meet people who have some kinds of, Cancer energy to them, which would be more like nurturing, more emotionally connected with them, a stronger sense of sensitivity to those you're bonded with there, a sense of family. These are all kind of Cancer types of connections. And then we want to also say, what area of chart does Venus rule in your chart? Well, she rules the 3rd house. This is fascinating because that part of your soul, of your chart, will get impacted more. It'll like become a dominant theme when you go to this Venus line. And the 3rd house is all about communications, all about networking, idea sharing, information processing, how we synthesize ideas and stories and share them with people, marketing, promotions. The third house is all about that. So it gets really amplified in that location in LA. Venus also rules your eighth house. And the eighth house rules things like our deep psychology, but it also rules how we blend our resources with other people. So this could be a location where you learn how to have a bigger influence in the world by who you're connected with. You're learning how to impact the world by how you negotiate and compromise and team up in a mutually empowering way. But, we have to watch that there might be a little power struggle here, or a little control issue here, some of those eighth house psychological shadows that might come up. So it's not just that you go to a Venus line and it's like this. It's, okay, what are all the nuances going on with your Venus that would be strong in this location? And so that's the strongest personal energy that's there, professional energy there, and permanent energy that's there for you. And then, as we talked about before, there's also cycles over an area of the world at a certain time. Like we would say forecasting over a location. So we could look at short-term and long-term cycles over like LA or any other part of the world. And this is where we get into the idea of when should I go where for maybe some certain opportunities, or I want a certain relationship, or maybe there's something going on in the area of career for me I want to pick up on. And this is where we get into more of the strategy of when to go where. What I can tell you right now, just looking at the now for you, this moment in time for you, it is really, really strong in terms of destined encounters with people. Like the people that you're meeting right now there, whoever's part of your circuit, it feels like some kind of soul family, and that they are really supporting your evolution, and you're really needing to nurture those relationships. This is because of what we call the North Node, which is a symbol of our destiny unfolding. The destiny is unfolding here for you through relationships. It's on the angle of partnership for you. So
is that everywhere?
That's a temporary cycle. No, this is just for you. Like literally October being right over LA into say the first week or two of November. You have this North Node, this evolutionary drive through relationships there. So that's where I'd say if you have an opportunity to be there during that time, or to be connecting with people, networking with them at that time, who you're connecting with are helping to unfold your destiny in some way.
Cool. I was going to ask
so
you
that's
too,
a short-term transit. It's only for a couple of months. Yeah.
And when does that go through? Till December, you said?
No, just into the first 2 weeks of November. And then that same influence is going up the coast, essentially. So it's just moving more westward. So we can actually track, we can track it like week by week, month by month. We can track these cycles,
Let me ask you, I know we talked a little bit about it, being that I'm in Dallas and I'm based in Dallas. Have you read anything or have you seen anything in the chart based in Dallas? I feel like Dallas is a home. I know everywhere I go, I know people. No matter where I go, no matter where it is, it gets tough a little bit to even go place. I mean, I love it, but you'll get stuck in a conversation for a while if you don't watch out. And everywhere you go, I mean, I'm talking everywhere, is there anything in the chart that it talks about Dallas, or can you see anything in that chart?
Yes.
What do you see about that, about Burgess and Dallas?
Well, one of the strongest, there's a number of influences here for you. Two of them that jump out are Mars and Jupiter, very strong. You actually have those planets in your birth chart, what we call conjunct. That means they're very close to each other in the same sign of the chart. So they're in Aries in your chart, and they're in your second house. So we can interpret all of that. But just first to understand what Mars and Jupiter are in a location, First of all, that's a very energizing location because Mars brings activation, energy, drive, desire, passion, and then Jupiter brings expansion, joy, opportunistic energy, teaching, broadcasting, publishing. So it's like you have all this energy behind or activation of that Jupiter teacher, inspirer, or broadcaster part of you. And that's going to just keep you really amped up when you're there. I mean, this is really over the top energy. Usually when we see that combination of location, we should be very physical with our energy. But we have a lot of it to begin with. But if we don't get some of it out in more physical ways, it can be like too much to contain. But for someone in the broadcasting or the publishing or the media world, this can be really, really, really powerful, especially because of another planetary influence that you have there, which is Neptune. Neptune is on the angle of career, actually in all the major cities in Texas. And Neptune impacting the career or the vocation is telling us a few things. Neptune rules the arts. Neptune rules imagination. Neptune rules the dream world, the spirit world, the soul. And so we know that all of those themes, media, imagination, the soul, they're all going to impact your career in some way in this location. And of course, when we're doing therapy, like this is a huge part of it. But Neptune is definitely a media planet. It's a planet that rules like, cinema. So, or television, all of the radio. So this would be a place that, you can really channel a lot of kind of artistic energy, creative energy, sharing ideas with people. But with a Jupiter, the ideas would be more inspiring, more expansive, more even like philosophical. That's what Jupiter represents. He brings a kind of wider perspective of reality. And then the Mars in you is going to keep you really driven. And man, Mars, Jupiter, I mean, that's the 80-hour work week for sure. So if you got off those lines, like even down in like Austin, let's say, or, Southern Texas, or, California being completely different, you wouldn't be on those Mars Jupiter lines. So, you might not work as hard, so that's one thing. But I think Jupiter is a really important planet for you in your chart because you have Jupiter ruling your area of career, your 10th house, and Jupiter also rules something called your North Node, which is that point we talked about before, which symbolizes destiny, evolution, and the growth of the soul. So Jupiter is a very significant planet for you because of where what parts of your chart he rules. And so Jupiter lines would be something I would want to study with you around the world because they can enhance your career, bring some success through your outer persona, and help your soul grow. One of those places for you I saw just jumped out was in Bali, of all places.
Wow.
So you might have to take a trip to Bali and do some live shows from Bali. But yeah, so that's how we start to look. It's like, well, if you move to where the planet that rules your career is very strong, you're going to help your career grow. And because it's Jupiter, it's going to have to do with things like expanding or broadcasting a message to the world, inspiring people, publishing. It's everything that you're doing with the media. So those would be lines for you where I'd really want to get very specific and just dot out around the planet where you can, you can connect with people from those locations. You don't have to move there yourself, but you can connect with them and they'll hold that energy for you. And also you can go there, you can travel there, and you can have those kinds of experiences that we've been talking about with Jupiter.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's really cool. Yeah, I got to do a deep dive with you, man, on these Jupiter lines. I got to check this out. I got other places I'm thinking about, but we'll talk about that another show for sure. But yeah, I definitely want to have you back on. learned so much valuable information. And let me ask you, for folks that are out there listening right now,
Sure.
how can they find you?
Yeah, great. Well, my website is divinetimingcoaching.com, Divine Timing Coaching. And I have a blog there that actually has some videos and writing about astrolocality, what we've been talking about today. For instance, love lines. We have a great one about that. We have one about location-independent entrepreneurs or digital nomads using this tool. So there's some of that there. I also have online courses at Divine Timing Online School. So if people want to study more about astrology and archetypes, career, relationships, there's a lot of classes there. And then the Practical Esoteric is the podcast. And so we take concepts like astrology and numerology and human design and yoga and all these kind of esoteric tools, and we bring them into real practical application on the show. So love to have you check that out on iTunes or on Stitcher.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I'm going to definitely have you back on the show. We got a lot more stuff to talk about. I'd like to do a video conference thing with you as well. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, because then we can look at the maps. People can get a little idea, because this is something, sometimes it's hard to kind of grok it in your mind, like imagine it. But when you see the maps, it starts to make more sense. And it's, it gets really exciting. It's like, it's a really fascinating topic, and I just geek out on it all the time. And, you know, it's how I move around the world. And right now I'm in Mexico when we're having this call, and I'm on my moon line here, really strategically looking for a place that might be a base for me. Moon lines can be very emotionally nourishing, can be grounding, can be supportive of basically calling a place home. And so I'm definitely looking for that in my life. So, you know, I'm here on a little bit of a reconnaissance mission to see if this might be one of those places. So far, I'm loving it. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope it all works out for you, and I definitely know that we'll be in touch in the next few days, and I just think it's a very powerful message, and I look forward to having you back on Live Your True Life Perspectives, and in the meantime, I hope you find what you're looking for there.
Awesome. It's been wonderful today, Ashley, and I hope people will reach out if their curiosity has been piqued. I'd love to offer them a discount if they will mention this show and this podcast, because I just want to keep supporting you and your fantastic work and the community that tunes into it. So hit me up at Divine Timing Coaching. I'd love to connect with all the audience. It's been a pleasure today.
Great having you on the show, sweetheart, and look forward to having you on next time.
Awesome. Take care.
I find this stuff very fascinating. It's so interesting, and I definitely will learn more. You know, I think we can't ever learn enough. I'm not saying that you need to do like introspective self-study every day for the rest of your life, but I think that many of us don't do any of it. And I think anything that we can garnish about ourselves, any value we can find, anything that can really help us to understand ourselves better, that'll develop ourselves and help us with our self-esteem, is powerful. And we should use that power to our advantage in a positive way. And I think when we really get to know ourselves, when we learn about ourselves, it shows ourselves a great deal of how much we care about ourselves. And that to me is powerful. More often than not, I feel like we don't do the self-work. And I think it's just very vital. Whether it's astrology, whether it's psychology, whether it's life coaching, whatever it is that really connects and resonates with you, maybe it's a combination. But it's a combination of sciences that really combine to help you find you. And I'm a big believer in not ever wanting regret, so I would rather not have regret in my life. And if you are that way too, it's all about self-exploration, understanding, and honesty. I hope this show has inspired you to just learn more about yourself and to educate yourself on some of the stuff that we talked about. You know, nowadays with Google and the internet, it's a wealth of knowledge that you can find some interesting stuff to learn and to grow. And I hope that this show has inspired you to learn even more about yourself. In the meantime, don't forget to live your true life.